Alright, what is up everybody? So, just wanted to talk about the new Warframe a little bit. I know everybody's been chatting a ton about the new war, and I haven't really heard too much about the new Warframe. So I just got Caliban, and been messing around with him a little bit, trying different builds out. Honestly, I haven't even invested any Forma into Caliban yet. I don't know if I want to. And I don't, I don't play Warframe as much as I used to, so I kind of wanted to hold off on that. But I did want to go over my general thoughts and some build ideas, how I think he'll scale with different stats, what some good build paths might be, and what I think are some pretty big issues with the frame in general. Um, so first, we can just talk about the abilities. So I'm just going to. I was trying out different helmet options on the first slot there. So Razor Gyre is. I think this is legitimately the worst Warframe ability in the entire game. Yeah, I've never seen this Sentient Wrath destructive blast damage occur. It does basically 0 damage. You don't really care about the healing too much because, I mean, like he kind of has decent armor, like okay base armor, like, and he has his passive adaptation, which is worse than normal adaptation, but you could conceivably do something like a, health tank Caliban, but that would definitely only work at lower levels. I honestly don't even think that would be Steel Path viable. He just doesn't have the health pool or the armor to sustain like a frame. I think like the squishiest frame that you can like health tank on is probably like Lavos. I think Lavos, Valkyr, Nidus, and Aros. Obviously, the last two you have to do that. But yeah, so I don't know. The healing is and overall this ability is just very very flat. Yeah, I was not a huge fan. So Sentient Wrath, I guess I could go here. It'll look a little cooler. So this ability I thought would be really really good. I was like, oh my god, this is Rhino's 4 as a 2, and it's his Subsume ability. That's insane. Except it's not. And so I'll go over some of the reasons it's not. So it does have this damage vulnerability, which is like okay. In general, like I think the consensus in the community is after the galvanized mods and ranged arcanes came out, I don't think Warframes are struggling in the damage department at all. You can basically just take a Kuvazar and equip Vazarin and go to max level. Like, it's just that easy. Just weapons alone are so insanely strong right now that damage amp is like meh. It's kind of whatever. Now, some of the things that are good about this ability is it's not a whole ton of drain. So 50 is honestly not too bad. Like 50 energy is pretty low. Pretty solid base range, 22 meters. Very respectable. The max targets, though, that is an unfortunate stat on this ability. Because it kind of prevents you from going like a pure CC build. And so when I say like a pure, think something like Nyx, where you can just go max range on Nyx, dump all your strength, and just CC stuff with Chaos. And because of shield gating, you'll be pretty good. Like that frame doesn't even really need to run Assimilate anymore because of shield gating. Now, Caliban can't do that because of this max targets thing. So you basically can't go low power strength or this ability is useless. Which is kind of sad because it has a really good range. I thought this ability was going to be a lot better. There is another issue with this ability that I will talk about in a little bit. Lethal Progeny. Now, I was really hyped about this ability. So one, I think the duration should be a little longer. I really, really dislike upkeep abilities that have durations lower, base durations lower than 30 seconds. I feel like it just gets tedious. And that's kind of just been my internal threshold. That's one of the reasons why I don't run Nourish on Grendel, because I think 20 seconds as a base duration for a buff is kind of insane. You're just constantly recasting your buffs rather than playing the game. So 30 seconds gets you, if you just slot in prime continuity, gets you pretty close to a minute. I feel like that's like a decent spot. Anything less than 30 seconds, I personally kind of find annoying. So once again, I think that this ability looks really cool because of the shield restore. And obviously shield gating is super meta. I was pretty disappointed with this ability. The sentients do like basically no damage, even on targets with like 0 armor. I mean, they do like okay damage. The AI is atrocious. Like, I would jump down a ledge or something and they would just never follow me, or like I'd go to fight enemies and they would just run away, like really bad. And then the worst part that I found was very often the sentients would just stop restoring your shields. So in a shield gating build, think about like Hildren. She relies on pillage restoring her shields for her kit to function and to survive. Protea, relies on her shield drone, and those are very reliable. They always work. So imagine if you have Caliban and you go a shield build, and your primary way of regenerating your shields literally just runs away. Or sometimes the sentients would start attacking and stop regenerating your shields, and you would just die. It was, and the fact that you have to use this ability basically has a 20-second duration and a 150 energy cost, because you have to summon the sentients one by one. So it's kind of like Ureli's 1, where you don't get the full effect of the ability until you cast it multiple times. And I hope this is not a trend for new Warframe abilities, because DE, it kind of sucks. Like, if I'm going to use an ability, I would much rather just get the full effect right away. I would rather this cost 75 energy, and I would just get all 3 sentients right away. I personally found this ability to have a really annoying amount of upkeep for like what is basically a buff ability. Then you get to his 4, Fusion Strike. So I personally found this to be the most promising part of his kit, because of the shield and armor strip. And it has a pretty high base amount, which is 50%. So you only need to get to 200% strength to max this out, which is not bad at all. It's pretty manageable to get that amount of strength. The damage, because it's blast, which has pretty poor modifiers against most health types, is It did not feel like this was packing a punch in terms of damage. Now the range is a little misleading, because the range is how far away you can have the beams converge. And so I'm just gonna hop out and start showing some stuff. So the range is, so that's 30 something meters. So that's how far away you can have the beams converge. So if we just go here, So where the beams converge produces this blast that sucks enemies in and strips their defensive, or strips their defenses rather. So let me actually get some mods or like an actual build. So this is just this is not a full build. I was just messing with this. You know, I would probably use like enemy radar here or something. So I was trying to use a shield gating approach. Long story short, ended up going with these 3 mods to get the over that 200% cap. I liked range a lot. Duration, I feel like Caliban is one of those frames where you wish you could have like every stat maxed out to make him feel good. And I often find that those frames are like the worst. Because that's just not possible, right? Because of how mods work in Warframe, you can't do that. So you always have to sacrifice something. Whereas there's other frames where I mean, my mag build, most of my mag builds have like 3 augment mods because I don't care about stats on mag. Like her abilities are so good, just base, that you don't really need mods that badly. You can just like get a little like just prime continuity and you're pretty much good to go, or just like some range or whatever. I don't think Caliban is like that. I think you kind of need to invest in specific things to make him feel good. And if you don't, his kit kind of just doesn't work. So the biggest one is getting that 200% strength, and that'll give you 100% armor strip, this is the most important thing, right? Now this ability costs 100 energy, which is, for what it does, considering this is like a glorified, like a really bad version of Ensnare with 100% armor strip, I don't really know if 100 is like fair. I really feel like so one of the things I'd like overall, I think it would help a lot if Caliban's energy costs were reduced in general, or if they incorporated some, I don't know, some type of energy management into his passive, maybe. Like if you take a different damage type, or like you stack up absorption, it like gives you energy regen, or I don't know, something. Because even with energize and messing around with different things like equilibrium, the whole equilibrium plus synth mods on your pad and blah blah blah, like he really encourages spamming all of his abilities, and it's really hard to keep up with how much energy this frame needs, especially when he doesn't really have that great of base energy. Like there's no way that you can play this frame without primed flow. Like some frames like Wisp has 300 base energy and her abilities are cheap as hell. You can play Wisp with blind rage and no primed flow easily, and you will never feel it. This frame, I was honestly struggling to like manage my energy, which is pretty rare if you have Arcane Energize. I was trying Death Cube and stuff like that. So that's one thing that I think would be really nice if they looked at his energy costs. I found it's really hard to fit efficiency into this build, honestly. And this should really be a brief respite, but like I said, I haven't formatted this frame yet. Right. So range is also very good, once again, because of his 4. That radius will suck enemies in. So it's kind of like a budget ensnare, or it's really painful to say this, but kind of like a worse version of Zephyr's 2. Like, if Zephyr's 2 is looking good compared to Frame's 4th ability, now Zephyr's gotten a massive amount of buffs, and honestly, playing this frame kind of felt a little like playing Zephyr in a way, like just in terms of playstyle, like grouping enemies up and nuking them down. Like duration, I think you would honestly want as much duration as possible for your sentience. However, once again, it's just really hard to have all of that in one build because of how corrupted mods work. So I think it's going to be tough to make builds for him, especially if you're shooting for that max strength. Now, if you get to like around 200% strength, that gives you about 30 targets for your 2, which isn't too bad. And even with just 175% range, pretty respectable. Like 38.5, that's pretty good. Now, one of the issues is that his 2 travels as a wave. So everything doesn't get CC'd right away, which is can kind of be a problem. Now let's go over some of the awkward things of his kit. So let me just set up a little test build here. So flow, let's do efficiency, just to be able to show stuff off here. Okay. Now, another reason that this frame reminded me of Zephyr is because it reminded me a lot of old Zephyr. And that's not really a compliment. Old Zephyr had a ton of contradicting aspects of her abilities. Her tornadoes would try to suck enemies in, but if you actually attacked them, it would knock them out of the tornadoes. Her 2 was trying to group stuff up, but if you actually tried to use her 2 with her tornadoes, it would knock them out of the tornadoes. And then even when they changed her 2, before they added the vortex effect, it would kind of just like gently push enemies towards a point instead of actually making them converge. Now I honestly think Zephyr is ridiculously good. But this frame has a lot of the same issues. So let's look at the 1. So the 1 does like really bad damage. It has this like kind of interesting dash effect, but it ragdolls enemies, right? I don't know about you guys, but okay, that thing was over here. Now it's way the fuck over there. Now I can't kill it. Now I have to go all the way over there and kill it. It's like, that's annoying. I personally really don't like things that ragdoll enemies. I think that's like a really frustrating kind of gameplay. Now, another thing would be his 2. Okay. See how those enemies are just floating all over? Yeah, when it says in the tooltip that the enemies will just float in the air, they were serious. They will literally just float there and float away. They will just float away. Now here's another cool feature of Caliban's kit. So those are affected by his 2. If you use his 4, it will end the 2's CC early. See, I had 6 seconds left on my 2 when I cast my 4, but it didn't matter. The other thing is that his 4 ragdolls the shit out of enemies. His sentience, one of their attacks, will also ragdoll enemies. Right? Do you kind of see what I'm getting at? Like, this frame has a lot of really, really annoying shit about it. Hence why I have not formatted this frame yet. So let me just summon some dudes over here, put this build on, and then I'm going to show some builds or some interactions that I thought were positive. So I really think that this frame could be really good. I think this frame needs some Protea type buffs. Like, just make this a vortex. Like, just make it actually suck enemies in to one point. Don't do this like, we're just going to ragdoll shit towards that point and it's not going to work. Make his 1 actually either do damage or at least not throw enemies into another mission because it, knocks them back so far. Tether is now for his 2. I would like probably the same change as Titania's Lantern, where enemies in Titania's Lantern kind of get tethered to that spot, and I think that would be really good. And then his 3 like really just needs more duration. I think it just if it had more duration and these things need to be always shielding you no matter what. I think So those changes could really make him good, and maybe looking at his energy a little bit. Now, in the Simulacrum, this can work, right? And so this is a gas Proboscis Cernos, right? So you group enemies up, and they're all grouped on top of each other. I've got a really strong gas weapon, so everything dies, right? So 185 heavy gunners, which that's roughly the difficulty you're gonna run into in like a steel path incursion, maybe, but not much more than that. So another cool thing, so there's this interaction with acid shells, which is the Sobek augment mod, and Saren's Toxic Lash, because Toxic Lash creates an additional damage instance, so it interacts interestingly with that mod and basically makes enemies go boom. Now Zata's Whisper, which I've used as my one, does the same thing. It creates an additional instance of damage using the void damage type. So now we could do something like this, and hey, they're all dead, right? So because they're like multiple instances of damage, the Sobek acid shell procs will kind of like cascade and proc off themselves. So that's pretty cool. That interaction works really well. Now the downside to that is you're using the Sobek. And I do have it here. I'll just show my build for the Sobek really quick. Now, I do have a Riven for this. It's not super great. I mostly just use this for removing impact, and I really like the punch through. Plus, it has a lot more damage than Prime Point Blank. Otherwise, it's just a heat build. This is honestly not that bad, but I'm mostly using this for acid shells. Now, the other really good interaction that I found, and this is not a new interaction, this is already known, but it worked really well with Caliban. So you group enemies up, you glass them, boom, they go boom. Now that works really well with Ensnare because the Vitrica procs will also proc Slash. So I'll just show my Vitrica build really quick. So this is just like, this is just a build that I use in normal missions. Vitrica is a really, really good weapon. So, and as you can see there, it just obliterated those enemies. An interaction that I wanted to work better but didn't work as well as I was hoping was Zymos. Because a lot of times the enemies will get ragdolled down and not necessarily stand up as nicely. But if you can target them, then it works super well, right? So Zymos was pretty good. So, long story short, basically anything that can take advantage of grouping up enemies and causing damage to enemies around them, because his 4 not only groups enemies up, but it also strips their defenses. This kind of opens up the possibilities a little bit, because in Steel Path, even with this type of approach, it usually either needed to be pure damage or slash damage. But because the enemies have no armor, almost any damage type will work. So things like Zacti Prime, Spore Lacer doesn't really have that. Zacti Prime would be more of like a gas build with that. The problem with most of this is that it requires like really specialized weapons and weapon builds, and those weapon builds are really, really, really bad if you're not getting tight grouping up with your 4. Now, I'm going to do this, and so enemies are going to start attacking me, right? So this is, a little more like a real situation. And it turns out, like, if enemies are doing stuff and they're not just, like, sitting there, your 4 doesn't really do, like, anything. You can use your 2, but then they just start floating away. And then you can use your 4 after your 2, but then it ragdolls them even more, and it cancels your 2. Okay, so kind of an issue. Also, like, you know, considering I just spammed a bunch of my strongest abilities at a decent amount of power strength on enemies with no armor, I did a depressingly low amount of damage. So now I'm going to look at these enemies without the AI part, or sorry, let me unpause the AI, and I'm going to turn off invincibility, right? So I'm going to summon my dudes, get the squad in, right? And so, so the range on them restoring your shields is pretty low, right? So you really need to stay by them. And a lot of times they'll just stop. Like, I'm not actually getting attacked here. Okay, here we go. Okay, so they're all alive, and I'm slowly starting to get my shields back. Yep. Okay, please shield me. Please shield. Nope, no shields happening. So this was just like incredibly unreliable, I found. Like, I did not feel safe at all using this. And then good luck trying to actually use Zymos, like, in this type of a situation, when things aren't actually getting grouped up nicely. Vitrica also just doesn't, you know, kind of stops functioning. Yeah, because Vitrica relies on things being grouped up really close, and if they're not, you know, so you kind of get the gist. I don't, you know, I would like to invest more in Caliban. I honestly think Caliban has a lot of potential. But how he is right now is, I would probably just wait for buffs. I am assuming that Caliban is going to get buffed because like, this needs to be an actual vortex. Like let's just look at Zephyr. Let's just look at what they did with Zephyr's 2. Right? So Zephyr's 2, so let me make sure I actually have it on this build. Right, Zephyr's 2, look at this. You see that? It actually creates a like an actual vortex effect. I think this build has kind of low range. But you see how it's like super nicely grouping enemies up? And you can actually group shit together with this. Right? You can actually, it actually works. Then you can summon her stuff and do that, and like, you know, whatever. The Sobek doesn't really work that well until you kill something. But, you know, I don't, I think why I'm a little frustrated with Caliban is because a lot of the things that are wrong with him or are frustrating with him are things that we have had to get adjusted on other frames already. Right? Like things like buffs being annoying, or inconsistent CC, or really useless abilities that, you know, have anti-CC almost, or like stuff like that. I don't know if Caliban is, maybe what I'm thinking is maybe Caliban was designed, always intended to be part of the new war. But you got to remember, the new war was technically started in 2018. So maybe Caliban is just a really old Warframe design, right? That's a possibility. I think Caliban has some potential if he gets some buffs. How he is right now in like actual combat situations, I really don't think he's very good. I would literally rather play Ureli, which is like, that's, you know, that's pretty bad. And now, of course, you're going to see people like, oh my god, I went to like level cap with Caliban. Okay, this is what you need for level cap. Okay, protective dash. Okay. And okay, now you now have a level cap capable build. Right? Like, getting to level cap in Warframe is not hard because there is some crazy ass cheese that you can use. And I feel like it's super disingenuous. Like, it really bothers me when I see YouTube videos that show these builds that are either just like reliant on some cheese mechanic, or they don't actually work in real gameplay. Like, the stuff that I was showing here it didn't even work in the simulacrum. I'm not even gonna go into a real mission. Like, if something's not gonna work in the simulacrum, it's sure as hell not gonna work in an actual mission, right? So, and at the end of the day, Warframe is not about getting to level 9,999. Warframe is about doing content and having fun. And if you're doing lower level stuff, I think Caliban is probably fine. I think he would probably struggle in Steel Path though, which is, I think like the cap at which I kind of draw the line for making a build for is like Steel Path incursions. Like if a frame can't do Steel Path incursions easily, there's probably like an issue. And I was struggling a little bit to do those with Caliban. So, if I wasn't using like a Kuvazar or something, like once again, we have weapons that are so strong that they can kind of minimize the issues with the frame because they can just you could just play a mission as a Kuvazar, like not even attached to a Warframe, and you would just plow through it no matter what the difficulty was. So that's kind of my take on Caliban. I really hope Caliban gets some buffs, like an actual vortex on his 4, um, overall energy management buffs, fix the clunkiness on his 3, such as the AI, the triple cast, the duration. I don't do something to the 1 because that ability is just god awful. And then 2, like the ragdolling on the 2, or free floating nonsense with the 2 really needs to get changed. So, I doubt that anyone at DE will see this or care, but if they do, it would be really appreciated. So, with that, I hope everybody has a good day. I hope everyone has a good holiday season. Stay safe out there, and I will see you next time.